Good morning and greetings from Lagos, Nigeria. It's such a pleasure to be able to log in for this 11th PAGTIC conference with the theme Economic Development for Peace and Conflict Resolution. I'm so sorry that I'm not able to be there physically, but I had looked forward to this. I think part of the reason why I'm still in Lagos will be discussed during this session. It has to do with the visa process to the US. I have been to the US severally over the past couple of years. In fact, I have almost 9 US visas in my passport back to back, but I've been in the process of renewing my visa for a couple of years now, and the process is so long. That's why I'm unable to travel and be physically in Sacramento. However, we're having this conversation, and I know that the theme for this session is the issue of corruption in governments or fragile states. So, to get us started, I love speaking about Africa. Africa is a beautiful continent, 54 countries, fantastic landscape, and one of, I think, in my own personal opinion, one of our final gardens on earth. And it's also very rich natural resources, people, human, and all that, with minerals, solid minerals, compared to other continents around the world. However, Africa also it has a very complicated history, and to not understand that history is also to misunderstand Africa. So maybe that's why it's called the Dark Continent. Africa has been thoroughly abused over the years, extensively exploited, some of it still to date, very misunderstood by the developed countries and the third world. Some of the other continents too misunderstand Africa because of its complicated nature. It is extremely diverse. It's our first home for the human race. So in Africa, we have all the races you can count. We have Africans that are all races from one spectrum to the other. So most people think also that Africa is purely just black people. Then Africa also has been gaslighted, mostly by the foreign media. They focus only on the bad sides of Africa, the great, fantastic, awesome things happening in Africa, but no, most times they're not covered by the foreign media. The best way to understand Africa is not to approach Africa with any preconceived mindset and to come curious, expectant, observe, listen, ask questions, and try and integrate, you know. Try and integrate not by traveling from airport to the other. No, no, no. After landing at the airport, take the road trips, take the train rides, take the bus rides, stop over, talk to the people. Africans are very friendly people, warm and cordial. They're also very curious. They also know that they have been misconceived, and most times they try to show themselves to those who are interested. Anybody who wants to work with Africa and in Africa, Ubuntu is a very good mindset to have. You know, Ubuntu is a phrase, a philosophy in Africa. I am because we are, and we are because I am. So integration is very important for Africa. Collaboration is very important. Engagement. Many of our African cultures and traditions, correspondence is by oral tradition, storytelling, and narration of events through history. So, with that context, I'm back to our theme of economic development for peace and conflict resolution. In the few minutes that I want to speak, is that I'm sending this video because the internet connection was really very bad and I wasn't very audible when I spoke. So, I'll just share a few thoughts. Africa has a lot of challenges, just like all over the world. We know about the conflicts, the wars, the upsets, and all that that is happening. Africa is not different, and our own has also been in a different dimension. So, one of the issues that we have had is the issue of democracy. Africa, many of the African countries have taken democracy but have not contextualized it to the cultures and the behaviors of the people. Then also, some of them have taken different methods, and sometimes it doesn't work. The other side is that Africans themselves need to be educated in terms of the rights of the citizen as a taxpayer and as of somebody who is of a voting age. Public office holders also need to be enlightened that they're actually employees and serving at the behest of the citizens who have selected and put them in office. The citizens also, as long as they can earn income, they pay taxes, and they can vote, they're actually the employers of those in public offices, and those in public offices owe them transparency and accountability for the collective resource. I think that is a big issue for Africa to be able to practice democracy and be able to select leaders that will deliver expectations of the people. Incidentally, 2023, Africa has Agenda 2063, which is our 50-year strategy plan. We've done phase one for the first block of 10 years. And the second block of 10 years, incidentally, starts in 2023. There also, Africa has about 12 mega elections on the continent. We saw two last year, Angola and Kenya, and some of the issues are still reverberating into 2023. And then we have 10 more mega elections in 10 big countries in Africa, including my dear country, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, to mention a few. That means that by the end of 2024, all being well, Africa will have a cohort of new leaders, new set of leaders around this time of Africa's transformation. So the issue about the selection of this cohort of leaders, if you remember in some years back, decades ago, we had the cohort of Kwame Nkrumah, Bafemi Awolowo, and all of them, and Tafawa Balewa. And at that time, many of them moved for the independence of some of these African countries. I think we're on the edge of another mega transition in Africa, and watch the elections of last year and this year and see the cohort of new leaders in 12 countries, 12 out of 54. That's quite a large number. And as somebody who has traveled to more than 1/3 of Africa, and even traveling to the countryside by the road and speaking with people and truly integrating, Africa is hungry for opportunities to play its role on the global stage. I've also had the privilege of talking to directors in businesses, and some of these directors have also spoken, and I know in terms of my work in governance, I know that integrated reporting has expectations for listed entities to have CSR projects and developmental projects and be assessed in their performance, not just in financials, but impact on their host communities and countries. So given that perspective, a thriving business sector in Africa is very key for the transformation that we aspire in terms of peace and conflict resolution, in terms of also economic development. Because a thriving private sector would employ, there will be job creation. A thriving private sector will pay taxes, and based on paying taxes, the governments will have the resources to provide the services that the people expect. And if the services that the people expect are not delivered effectively, and the people are very conscious and aware of their power as taxpayers and voters, they will replace the government officials. And if we have the social sector, the civil society, well governed, fully engaged, then they will be the watchdog of the society. And with those kind of perspectives, we cannot undermine the fact that Africa has some challenges. One of them that I'm also a beneficiary of the bad side of it is logistics. Traveling around Africa is a nightmare. You can travel from Lagos to Australia, and the person that is going to Conakry has not yet arrived in Conakry. Connections are very bad. The number of flights are not effective and efficient. There's no train services that connect mega cities across Africa. That's why in Agenda 2063, connecting Africa is a major, major issue. Traveling, if I'm leaving Nigeria and I want to go to 3 African countries, I will need to work on 3 processes for visa. That's not acceptable. Except if I'm going to a West African country, then we have the ECOWAS passport, then I can travel. But anything outside the ECOWAS, I will need to work on how to get access and arrive safely. The other side is the climate change. Africa, we have infrastructure deficits. Most of the mega infrastructure in the urban areas, but in the rural areas, they're very vulnerable and they're also at the receiving end of many climatic issues. So because of the climate change, they struggle for resources, struggle for farm produces, animal issues, and this brings conflict. The bigger cause of conflict for Africa is aspiration for political power. And because the process, many of the African countries, their constitutions do not get reviewed every 10 years. Ideally, it should be every 10 years, constitutional refreshment, and by consensus of all the citizens nominating their leaders to veto these constitutional amendments. However, some countries in Africa have had the same constitution even before Agenda 2063, like 20, 30 years ago. So that aspect is true. Then the other side is data. African governments, many of them do not have data. Some of them do not even know how many people are in the country. If you look at it, they're all estimates. Each country is supposed to have validated, verified census data that allows for demographic analysis and knowing how to provide services and the number required. Most times when African countries perform their census, it's just about counting number of people per location to decide how many polling units and how many votes that location can take. Census is not just about political power and voting. Census is about government providing services to those locations based on the demography of that place. And it's also for planning to know about the aging analysis and the social needs of the population. Finally, as I wrap up, I also want to bring about the issue of political choice of political leaders. The voting process. Africa should ideally, as I have written in my book, African Leaders Tete-a-Tete Navigating Entity Design and Prioritization for Systemic Outcome. I spoke about leaders at the individual level, leaders at the corporate level, and leaders at the jurisdictional level, including the regional economic blocks. It is very important for data. It is also very important for infrastructure to allow for diaspora voting. There are many Africans all over the world, on all continents, in all time zones, and many of them are contributing to Africa in terms of their resources. So if they can contribute to Africa in terms of their resources, why should they not be able to participate in the decision to choose who should lead the country that they have invested in? That diaspora voting is a big issue, and I recommended in my book that African Union and the African Union Commission should actually take it up and make sure that all members of African Union develop the infrastructure to allow for diaspora voting. In this second phase of Agenda 2063, it's not a favor to the diasporans, it's a right for the diasporans to be able to vote at home if they are going to be investing their hard-earned resources at home. So what are all these things for a business that is in America, that is trying to partner with Africa? The opportunities for business in Africa include I've mentioned logistics, transportation of goods, services, and people across Africa, especially in an African continental free trade phase of Africa's journey, the largest block market in the whole world so far. So the other side also is food value chain, from resourcing to distribution to processing to export. One other side is education, the literary education and civic education of the people for knowing their rights as citizens, and even also be able to hold their governments accountable. We also have need of security. African security, most of them are actually in the old age. They have not transited to advanced security methods and personal identity issues. So that is also a new business area for any business that is American that wants to invest in Africa. We also have the issue of tourism. Tourism and hospitality is a big thing for Africa because I've mentioned is one of the final gardens that we have on earth. So tourism is a very big area, and film industry, media, and all that. We have a very youthful population. Many of them are excited with the internet. They can see what is happening in other parts of the world, and they want to have that at home in Africa. So the youthful population, their curiosity and their exuberance is a very good thing. However, if the governments do not perform, this same youthful experience can be a big issue, and we're hoping that that will be a trigger for change. We've seen the Arab Springs, we've seen the NSAS in my country a couple of years ago, and these things are very important. And we saw how they came out en masse to vote because they want to be heard, they want their choices to matter. So that issue of succession of leaders across Africa is very, very key. So that is just what I would like to wrap up on. Once more, I'm so sorry I was not able to be in Sacramento. I hope that, for American businesses and the United States of America to really show interest in partnering with Africa in this new dispensation, many of these engagements should be happening in Africa, not in the US, especially with the US attitude to granting visa. I'm sure it's not only me that was not able to be in Sacramento. Many of us were not able to be in Sacramento. So don't tell us, show us that you really want partnership by visiting. In Africa, visiting your neighbor is a sign of respect for that neighbor. When you always invite that neighbor to your house, it's taken that you're just trying to talk down at that neighbor and show off. But if you get up from where you are, visit your neighbor, stay with your neighbor, and share a meal, you are no more a neighbor, you've become a brother. So, America, you have a good opportunity. Visit often. Many of the engagements with Africa should be in Africa because it doesn't make good balance for one country to summon 54 countries to that one country. That one country should show brotherly love and collaboration by visiting in the homes of the 54 countries and also enjoying this beautiful landscape and everything I've spoken about. I wish us a fantastic outing in Sacramento. I will be logging in all part of the conversation, and I look forward to learning from everybody. And for those who were able to make it, I wish you a safe trip back home. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.